Darby, sit down. We are away again, and we are moving on to item number 16. And we have David and Mark here, so welcome to the table.
16.
Addendum.
This one, right? That's the loose one.
This, yep, addendum.
Yeah, I'm all in favour of that. Then we can put a report out.
Electric battery, electric battery, electric battery, electric battery.
Welcome, David, to your last presentation. Now, I've got this right this time, to
You have, Councillor.
Auckland Council Finance and Performance Committee.
And stop smiling so much like you're really enjoying that this is the last occasion.
He told me the days and the hours.
So do you want to lead the way, given it's your last, or was Mark going to lead the way?
Mark, hand over to you.
I'll just do a quick summary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. We're seeking approval to basically change the order for 15 EMUs, which Council approved in October, up to 17 independently powered, i.e. battery-powered EMUs. The reason for that, at the time, or going back to July, this committee did approve the purchase of 17 battery-powered EMUs, subject to NZTA contribution and funding. As you know, we went to NZTA, and at the time there was political discussions around potentially bringing forward electrification of the line to Pukekohe. Therefore, in October, the council did approve the 15 EMUs. Since then, a business case has been submitted jointly between AT and Kiwirel to Ministry of Transport. That's being considered for the electrification. At the moment, the best advice we have is that final funding decision will not be made until the middle of next year, depending on whether it goes through the NLTF via NZTA or through the Ministry of Transport's own budget processes. Also in parallel, we have been working with CAF, the EMU supplier, to look at further technology improvements to see if we can reduce the price of the battery powered and improve the product. I'm pleased to say we have got to a position where we can improve the product. We do have the contractual commitment with CAF to make a decision by the 15th of December, however. Hence, at this point, we're seeking Council's approval to fully fund the delta in the cost of 38 million, but subject to us approaching NZTA early in the new year to get the usual contribution to that. At the moment, the conversations with NZTA continue to be positive, but there is no commitment, and they have with us procured an independent technical review of the battery solution, and on the basis that that comes through positive, we're hopefully going to go to NZTA very early in the new year to get that funding contribution. So happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we've got a mover, Councillor Newman, Councillor Darby second. So we've got that. Questions? Thank you. Councillor Filipani.
Sorry, I better. So the 20 million that you've got in A, 9 of that or 10 of that is Auckland Council cost, isn't it?
If NZTA contribute as we would expect them to, yes, that's correct.
So,
however, because of the contractual deadline with CAF, we wish to be able to place that order now, but we can't guarantee that NZTA will come to the party with that contribution, but we'd expect to. Overall, we're seeking council funding. If worst case scenario NZTA didn't contribute to the delta, it would be an extra 2 million over what this committee approved in July.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to clarify that, because the money that we will, as council, will put in, if there is no NZTA subsidy, bearing in mind the previous recommendation is going to be 2 million. 2 million?
That would be the additional council funding over previous approvals, yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So 10 at this stage will be a good scenario. Worst scenario is it'll cost us 20 million. But in fact, as a result, it'll only cost us 2 million?
2 million more than what you previously approved
Right.
in July.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I just wanted to make sure, so, okay.
Good question.
I mean, we get two, don't we? We get,
You get the extra 2 EMUs, which we need to operate to Pukekohe anyway,
Yep.
and you get the battery powered for the 17 EMUs.
yeah, for a cost of $2 million. Based on, I just wanted to get that clear for me. Based on the previous decision we made, it's an extra $2 million for what we will get.
Sorry, I probably need to
But-
be clear, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
and that if NZTA come on board,
Cheaper still.
It would be less.
it'll be definitely less by 10.
So if I could just clarify to make sure we're absolutely
Yes,
clear.
please.
In July, effectively council approved at 49% contribution from council, 101 million in total
Yep.
for 17 battery powered EMUs. Because of the NZTA decision, we came back in October, and that decision was rescinded by this committee, and a reduced level of council funding was approved. We've now reduced the overall cost, so if you approve this today, it would be 2 million more than what you approved in July, but you had rescinded that decision.
Okay, thank you.
And still
Councillor Casey.
I've got 2 questions. My first question is expected in-service date of late 2019. How does that match with the Mount Eden, the needing to get the trains across the Mount Eden precinct?
That's in line with that. The current, well, as you know, the CRL program is outside our control at the moment. So we would anticipate that the blocks of line will be from around 2019. It will be well into the middle of next year before the C5 and C3 contracts are let, based on what I know today. So it will interface with that.
So they're matching. That's fine. That was the right answer. My second question just relates to a kind of equivocal statement on our page 8, and I'll read you it. Maybe you can just explain it a wee bit better. It's AT will commence technical discussion with the EMU supplier CAF, the potential battery supplier COCAM of Korea in early December. And it's this last bit, to determine whether IP EMUs can be technically and economically viable.
So that conversation commenced actually towards the end of November. Our technical manager is in Spain at the moment, finalising those conversations, and we're actually literally just waiting for the final technical document to come through to confirm CAF and COCAM that that's all deliverable. But the conversations we have been having with Lloyd Major up in Spain confirm that it is all possible, and we're progressing on that basis, or we'd like to.
Can I just get you to confirm, I think on an earlier discussion you were still uncertain about the quality of the Korean batteries. Are you now absolutely certain that these batteries will do the job and that they don't constitute any degree of risk in their purchase?
So the answer is yes, at 2 levels, Your Worship, through the Chair. The COCAM batteries have met all the specifications, but in addition, the French competitor battery has now also come back into the market to compete with the Korean battery. So we actually have 2 battery options still on the table, and they are both pitching now for the CAF solution. So we are more than confident that we will get a fully compliant battery, and it could be COCAM or SAFT is the other company, which is French. So the answer is yes, but it could ultimately end up not being COCAM, and we're ambivalent on that as long as it meets all the international standards.
Okay. Second question is a slightly wider question. Other cities like Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, their trains that run on New Zealand rail tracks, do they fund the same percentage of the of their trains, or are we the only city that meets that 49% cost?
Historically, there's been different agreements for different purchase orders, to be perfectly honest. The 49% is currently the what the 51% is what NZTA actually contribute to rail infrastructure at a default level these days.
Across the country?
Correct. That's my understanding,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
And that 51%, what's the rationale for it? Is there any rationale for it, or?
My understanding, and this is a ministerial NZTA decision, but the FAR rate, the financial assistance rate, is set by NZTA, and it reflects basically regional support.
Yeah.
So, with due respect to Mark, I think the major public transport funds are at that level, but some FAR rates vary across the country where regional councils may struggle to meet, because the same principle applies for roading, etc., in terms of the FAR. We in Auckland have a FAR of 51%, and my understanding is that the FAR can be altered by a ministerial decision, which is the basis of what we approached NZTA for a change in the FAR for Amity, so that they could actually increase that beyond 51% to make it more viable.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Lee.
It's an interesting story. So in July, immediately after the annual plan had closed, you came to see us and asked for 17 battery trains, which was duly approved. And then, I understand, in September, NZTA rejected the whole idea. And so, in October, we saw you again with a request for 15 EMUs. And in your last few days, David, you're back again, and this time the battery trains are back. So I have to admire your persistence.
We've got something in common, Councillor.
You can be as cheeky as you like this time.
Thomas the Tank Engine. You've got nothing to lose now, David.
But I have to say I don't agree with your judgment, of course. With this new battery technology under consideration since October, so since October, new technology is under consideration, is that correct?
So you'll recall, if you go into the detail, we said at the time we asked for it that we were investigating further technology advances. We expected that we would be able to reduce the price and change some of the design criteria, but that we had to come and ask council for the money that we did, because at the time of doing it, that was the best figure that we had. That was discussed around this table. The events have fallen the way we expected them to, and that has actually now become a reality, and we're able to tell you what those numbers are and what the technology shift is. So this was all telegraphed at the last time when we had the conversation in July. The reason for the shift to 15 EMUs was because of political announcements pre the election, and NZTA deeming that it would be inappropriate to make any decision at all. And we then got them to change that and revert to the 15 EMUs to at least allow us to have trains operating in Auckland by 2019.
Good, they're operating now, but I'm glad they're going to be operating in 2019. David, in terms of electrification to Pukekohe, have you got the cost for that? How much that would cost?
It's not on the paper because it's not really our responsibility or mandate, because it's being done by the Crown through Kiwi Rail.
Exactly.
My memory of the submission is something around $220 million through the chair, but don't quote me on that.
Okay,
I'm just
that
going from
sounds
memory.
Higher than before, but that would be right. So our choice originally was 220 million from the Crown to electrify Pukekohe, or purchase these 17 battery trains at 207, in effect 101 million for us and 106 million for NZTA, who actually said no, that doesn't make sense. And I think given the investment in the Pukekohe electrification, I totally agree with the government on this one, and frankly, given you haven't resolved the technology and the passenger egress for these modifications, I'm really surprised to see you back again. But anyway, we'll leave it at that.
With respect, we have got the technology resolved, and I'm not sure what the passenger egress issue is on any of the trains going around the network now or to be able to service Pukekohe. The only issue you may be referring to is if you were going to extend the service through the tunnel to Kumeu and Huapai, then any train will have to be modified because if they get stuck in the tunnel, it's too narrow to get out any other way out rather than the end, which is basically, there is a design in place for that, which is similar to an aeroplane with a pop-out window.
Oh, well, that's a very unfortunate analogy.
At least they don't have to fall too far.
We're not actually, if you want trains to go through to Kumeu and Huapai, then all of the trains will need to be modified to allow an emergency egress to comply with current health and safety requirements.
Trains are going to Kumeu and Huapai and further north all the time, David. And we have surplus diesel trains that'll get us to Kumeu and Huapai, and you know that. But, you know, it's other people's money.
Oh, come on.
Rude to say.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going back to the finances here. And my question, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, maybe to the Mayor, I'm more worried about the NZTA subsidy, I should say. So, Your Worship, in your negotiations with the new government, are we talking about potentially increasing 51% we've had in the past, or at least confirming it at what we've had? Is that part of your list of things that you're wanting to achieve?
Part of the agenda for negotiation is the far rate on a range of different roads and modes.
Right.
And obviously we'll be going for the best deal that we can. And that may come down to the fact that we'll be able to afford to make a certain level of contribution to ATAP, but beyond that we can't, so we'll be trying to get them to adjust to our ability to pay, particularly in light of having a regional fuel tax in place.
Right, because I think that's kind of, for me, key, isn't it? There's a big difference between having 51% paid by somebody else and not being paid by somebody else, really. Yeah. I mean, just a math. I support it. I absolutely support the recommendation without a doubt, but I think that, yeah, the NZTA subsidy. I was very interested in your question before, that wasn't, I didn't realise it wasn't consistent across all councils, so that I learned something there. But I wouldn't want to lose our ability to keep a high percentage.
Councillor Watson.
Yeah, sorry, and it just follows on from that, and I may have missed it, but the two additional EMUs and the 20 million conversion, that hasn't been confirmed. Under what grounds would the subsidy not be confirmed? Like, in what circumstances would we not get that subsidy?
Right.
Well, that's what the Mayor was saying.
So I think if you take the two tranches separately, I think the probability of NZTA not applying their normal subsidy to the additional two EMUs is almost zero, because if they electrify to Pukekohe, they have to do it. So it's almost a default corollary of that decision. So because you can't run the service unless you have the EMUs. So the fundamental issue, I think, is that if the council saw their way clear to commit to the extra 20 million, the issue is whether it's going to cost the council 20 million to hybridise all 17, or 10 million to hybridise all 17 if NZTA agreed to subsidise the battery unit. I'm rounding the 50-50 number percent rather than 49-51. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I guess, and again, I maybe should have picked it up myself, but I'm just again wondering on why they wouldn't then subsidise the battery, that's obviously a bit more contentious or uncertain than obviously the EMU. So again, what's the specific grounds? Is that what we're referring to in respect to the technology, or something else we don't know?
Well, we haven't got a reason as to why they wouldn't. All we know is that last time they didn't because of election promises. So all we're saying is that they've got precedent to agree to one, which is likely that they'll agree to the extra two, and then we have to actually make the case for the hybrid version, which they've never actually made a decision on, other than they said no to everything when the election promises came out to bring forward the electrification.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, right. Well, we have the Councillor Lee.
All through this long-term plan process, Mr. Chairman, we've had to make difficult choices on the disposal of limited resources, and think of ways of actually raising extra revenue and cutting costs, including things like cost to the library and cost to the art gallery. Now we have a situation where our partners in central government have looked at this new technology battery train proposal, and for good reason in my view turned it down, but it seems that AT have not accepted this and have come back for even more money. Given that we probably through the political process, the election process, have achieved a commitment to electrify Te Pukekohe, it seems extremely wasteful and will look extremely wasteful for Auckland to spend extra money on battery trains, unproven technology, albeit under consideration, we understand, given all the competing aspirations that we have to deal with. We've heard about saving $1 million this morning, getting rid of a CCO, not Auckland Transport, of course. I do not think this is sensible, and technologically sensible. I don't think it's financially prudent. I don't think it's a good look in terms of our relationship with Wellington, given we have a commitment to electrify Te Pukekohe. We're told it'll take 5 years to get from Papakura to Pukekohe. Again, that's up to us really. That's up to how determined we are to get some progress. The whole Auckland system was electrified within 18 months, if I recall. The only other incentive is that rather than running diesel trains to Kumeu and Huapai, which AT has refused to do, diesel shuttles, these things could apparently go through the Waitakere Tunnel, except there are still technological issues regarding passenger egress to resolve. So I don't see any benefit in this at all. If there's a good example of ill-considered, wasteful spending on very questionable technology and bad and imprudent financial planning, this would have to be one of them, Mr. Chairman, so I can't support it.
Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what we have to remember here is this is not just about getting rapid transit trains to Pukekohe. This is about also serving the North Waikato under some sort of contractual arrangement with AT. It's an area of the country that's growing incredibly rapidly. When you look at this decision making over these hybrids, there is a degree of comedy in it, because initially we approved the hybrids because we wanted to do exactly what we're trying to do now. And NZTA turned it down because they thought they could actually do the electrification to Puki in a rapid order in 2.5 years. they actually investigated the business case, which took them a couple of months. They found there actually was 6 bridges they had to raise, and the substation to be built was going to take considerably longer, closer to the 5-year period. So we can actually still supply that service within 2 years by getting the hybrids. That's point one. Point two, as Dr. Warburton has pointed out, there is the opportunity to take the hybrids north, Hume-Huapai, with some additions for emergency exits in front and rear of the carriages. And secondly and thirdly is about the resilience of the whole network. So power outages, that happens, dropouts, and more importantly, when we're doing the CRL and the joining on into the main lines, we can still run the units and run a rapid transport system for the city. So I take Councillor Lee's views, and he's been consistently opposed to this, and that's fine, he's entitled to his opinion. However, this technology has been used in Britain, in Japan, and in China, and it is evolving. And as these things do, things improve, they change all the time. The batteries have got smaller, the technology's got smarter, and the costs have come down. This technology will service the part of the city that's currently growing the second fastest to the CBD. The northwest is right beside it. The 2 of our fastest growing communities getting a rapid train transport system a lot quicker what would normally otherwise happen. So I commend Auckland Transport staff and management for their work here. NZTA have to work alongside us quicker and better to get this thing moving forward.
Yep.
And let's just make it happen.
Thank you, Councillor Cashmore. Councillor Newman, I thought you would close the debate. We'll go with Councillor Darby first.
Look, thank you, and I'll be brief in regards to the motions before us, because I think the Deputy Mayor has covered the smart response that Auckland Transport have come back with on this, and I commend David and Mark for working this out with some real intelligence. You know, we could have just defaulted to what we thought was the course, but this is a very smart outcome, I think. So, look, what I probably want to say here is thank you, David, because I think this is your last formal presence here. And I met you, so I'm going to take some liberty here under this motion. I met you on a big black belching steam tug, I think a couple of days after you'd arrived with your wife, and you were wondering from the Waitemata, wow, this is the place I've got myself into, and little did you know you were here. What is it now, 7 years? 7 years. And David, you've had to pull through the new CCO into a semblance of something that could actually deliver on the expectations that Aucklanders had. And if there's any one CCO that's under the spotlight on a daily basis, it's yours. It's the one that we use and have contact with the most as Aucklanders. We go past our letterbox and we're in contact with your CCO. Every one of us, you know, 6 million of us. And I think you've had an enormous challenge in that time, a phenomenal challenge. And I know you've taken some criticism along the way, but you've actually, you've addressed that criticism, you've made your organisation stronger, and Mark, you know those numbers that are flowing through, particularly in the public transport area. They are absolutely phenomenal. I just want to really say, just in a few words, how grateful I am, David, for your leadership. It has been huge, and sometimes it takes a little while for history to reflect fondly, but I think history will reflect upon your period of stewardship at the helm of Auckland Transport very fondly indeed, and it will look at the success, the takeoff that we achieved in these 7 years of your leadership. Thank you.
Are you going to put forward a motion of thanks?
No, the Mayor's going to conclude after.
I just asked the same thing.
Moving,
Yeah.
Sorry, I
who's the mover of this motion?
No, that's okay.
No,
It's
it's
fine.
Deal with this one first.
Thank you.
Yep.
I can't top that, Chris. But thank you very much to Auckland Transport, and thank you, David. Look, the points have been largely covered, but I do want to reiterate what Bill Cashmore said. There is a significant challenge in getting the infrastructure in place from Papakura to Pukikoe, which is more complex than what I think some people appreciate. It's actually a longer stretch than you think. There are some existing infrastructure constraints on the network that need to be worked through. That is not something that can be rapidly addressed as part of the rollout of the electrification initiative. I think that there is some benefit, in a particular, not just to the south, although I will finish off by talking about Papakura, but there is some significant benefit to the resilience of the network in the northwest from this. And when I look at the heavy lifting that the Rodney Local Board is looking to undertake in relation to transport in that local board area, I'm very cognizant of the need to support the capacity of public transport in the northwest, and so I think that this acquisition complements that. And the final thing that I would say is that the urgency for me around this is the need to address the situation that is occurring in Papakura at this point, given that it is the location where a lot of people from Franklin are currently driving to, in order to avoid that suboptimal situation of catch diesel from at Pukikoe, go to Papakura, exit, swap services over, etc., etc. People are responding to that by driving to Papakura, which is very, very inconvenient for those commuters. And no, you can sit here if you want. And very inconvenient for the Papakura community that is doing the heavy lifting in terms of accommodating all of that unhelpful congestion. So I think this will make a useful contribution towards addressing that, and for those reasons, Chair, I'm happy to move.
Goff will reflect on not on history in the future, but today, and the many thanks we all have for you, Dave.
Well, if you take the vote first, then I'll just move a second resolution after that, if I may, Mr.
Right,
Chair.
We've got a move and a seconder for A, part 1, 2, 3, 4. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No.
No.
Record my vote against, please.
And right. And
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I can move formally that the governing body of Auckland Council thank David Warburton for his enormous contribution to our city as Chief Executive Officer of Auckland Transport. I'm not going to repeat everything Chris said. He said it incredibly eloquently, but you've taken on a job that has been big, it's been challenging, it's been difficult, and you've had to put up with your share of critics in a job of a nature that was always going to have brickbats as well as bouquets. But I want to acknowledge, on behalf of Council, our thanks for your enormous commitment, your energy, and your incredible competence. I've seen you before meetings on many occasions. I've never seen you lacking an answer to any challenge put to you. And we're very grateful, David, for everything that you've put into that job. It's been a vocation, not just a job. And to wish you and your family well in retirement, and hope that that isn't the sort of retirement that takes you right out of an area where you've got enormous expertise and still a lot to contribute. So I'll formally move that way, Mr. Chair, if perhaps I can ask the Deputy Mayor to second that.
Yep.
I already have a seconder actually, so sorry about that, Deputy Mayor.
I'm happy for the Deputy Mayor to take it, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to fight about it.
Where's the diversity in that?
So if we put that motion forward, Mr. Chair.
Go
deputy model.
Right, we have a mover and
Need a
seconder
balance.
for obviously a nice
Well done.
resolution. So all those in favour?
David.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, may I just say that I have appreciated the support around this table. The councillors have always been honest and forthright, and I genuinely feel that collectively you've supported Auckland Transport. Not everybody philosophically agreed with the structure on day one, and we worked our way through that, and I've really appreciated the support of all of you. And I think Auckland Transport will look forward to an ongoing and continued harmonious, loyal, dedicated working relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good luck in fixing up the traffic issues in Wanganui.
I'll be back.
Right, thank you very much. So we're now going to move to item number 15, which is should be fairly perfunctory, but we're going to ask Paul to come up.